Everyone, the CROC podcast is going to take a week off, but we're not leaving you empty-handed, as we are giving you the opportunity to listen to an amazing podcast that Dr. E was able to be on. Here now is Talaya, as she introduces you to Navigating Cancer Together, the podcast, and it's called The Unexpected Path, Helping Cancer Survivors Turn Tragedy into Triumph with Dr. Eanelli.
Hello, everyone. This is Talaya Dendy from ontheotherside.life, and you're listening to Navigating Cancer Together, the show that has something for everyone facing cancer. Why? Because everyone is different with different needs, beliefs, and perspectives. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode. I encourage you to open your minds and your hearts. Today, our very, very special guest, I'm so excited for you to meet him all. He is Dr. Thomas Eanelli. And Dr. Eanelli is a radiation oncologist out of New York with nearly 40, that's right, 40 years of experience. He credits his sustained passion for his work to the heroic survivors and thrivers he serves and the life lessons they have taught him. He is not just focused on being a technical doctor. He is a doctor who cares. He is the president of CROC, which is Citizens Reunited to Overcome Cancer, which was established in 1999. It is a grassroots cancer survivorship organization whose sole purpose is to support survivors and thrivers and their families. I had the pleasure of being a guest on Dr. Eanelli's The CROC podcast in March, and I will share the link in the notes for this episode as well, so you can refer back to that episode. And I must say, it was one of the best guest experiences that I have had thus far. I'm very grateful for that. I was welcomed and I was heard by Dr. Eanelli, and I can only imagine the patients that he supports, how great they feel getting that kind of support. And so now I'm going to switch from saying Dr. Eanelli to Tom. Tom is an amazing doctor and human being. Tom, thank you so much for joining us today and welcome.
Talaya, it is truly an honor to be here. Getting to meet you and really getting into your podcast and your work and finding out what a cancer doula is, and all that from reading an article from a little cancer journal got me a lifelong friend. You are articulate, you are smart, you are elegant, you are everything, and I am just so happy to have you on the same side, helping our survivor thrivers out there navigate, as you say, their experiences together.
Thank you so much, Tom. I am so honored that you're here. And I so appreciate the kind words that you have spoken to me and over me, and just the encouragement that you have continued to give me since we met. And you are definitely a friend and also a partner in this space in supporting people with cancer and their families. So, Tom, please tell the audience more from you about who you are. And then also, I think they may be curious about why you decided to become a radiation oncologist.
Oh, it's going to be great because I'm going to start by first I have to represent. So I know we're not on video yet, but I just want to show everybody I'm representing.
He has the Twins jersey.
I have my Twins jersey. Not only do I have the Twins represented because I had looked at Talaya's initial podcast when she was really supporting the Minnesota Lynx and that type of thing. So I figured she was a sports buff.
Yes.
And to know a little bit about me is to know that everything you have to know about me is what I'm wearing, because every day of my professional career, I walk into work wearing a sports jersey. It started out as just a fluke. I was wearing just one of my Ivy League sweaters. It was a cold day and the patients loved it. The next day I wore it again. They loved it. And then the third day I wore my tie and my shirt, and they said, "Where's the jersey?" And I don't think I've stopped wearing a jersey since. And what it is, it's not the jersey or that. What it is it's a metaphor. The metaphor is that, as people who work with cancer patients, cancer survivors slash thrivers, and we'll get to the definitions in a little bit. That's a very, very important role that we serve for a very important set of patients. It's a very scary disease. It's a very turbulent time in a patient's life. And the last thing that they need is to feel intimidated or to feel a cold, shivering barrier between their doctors and nurses and them. So what these jerseys represent is an informality, and we're going to talk about the pillars of my organization, and that's one of them. And that informality, that wearing of the jersey, breaking down that wall. If anyone wants to know who I am, that's basically who I am.
I love that, Tom. And, I knew that you were wearing a Twins jersey because of the colors. I'm like, okay. And I was going to ask you that once we got going, but you beat me to it. So thank you for repping Minnesota. And also, I really love the fact that you are very casual because it shows that you are approachable and it shows that you are willing to meet people, your patients, where they are. And I think that that's so important because, as you know, as a doctor, a lot of people have white coat syndrome, and that prevents them from asking questions, speaking up for themselves. And so you definitely make it easier by the informality, as you call it. So I think that's so cool. I must ask, Tom, how many jerseys do you think you have?
Well, behind me, and again, you can't see them, but it's kind of funny. My jersey collection started with all New York Mets jerseys because that was my team. But then I started thinking, well, I'm running out of New York Mets jerseys. So I started picking up some others, and then it became basically an arms race. So Russia would get a warhead, we would get 3 warheads. So if I got 1 jersey, I had to get 4 jerseys, and I now have every Major League Baseball team, every National Football team, every hockey team, and most colleges. So I'm working through, some specialty jerseys, but I would say maybe 200.
Wow, that is
But
impressive.
I want to tell you that this one is one of my favorite. So I
Nice.
also like to have a story for every jersey.
Okay.
So, and I also like to have the story related to our work, right? So Harmon Killebrew was one of the most famous of the Minnesota Twins. He probably predates you or many of your listeners, but Harmon's number was number 3. He came up in the 50s. He played through the 60s. His nickname was the Killer. Now, that which is kind of funny. He was named the Killer because he basically would hammer those home runs over the fence and hit monster home runs. And he hit 573 home runs in his career. But he was the kindest, sweetest, gentlest, quietest guy in the world. But the beauty of this is not only that is the Hall of Famer, et cetera, but he is also a cancer survivor thriver. So he had esophageal cancer, and he eventually succumbed of it. So I like to have a story for every jersey that I wear.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think that's very important as well. Um, yeah, I really like that story because I think that it makes a connection, and it really shows how down to earth you are and approachable you are. So thank you for sharing that. Tom, I'm sure that you've seen and experienced a lot of changes, loss, and grief. Please tell us, how do you take care of yourself so that you can continue to show up for your patients?
Oh, I appreciate that question. I think that's a very important question for all of my colleagues. So all of the people in healthcare who are taking care of our cancer patients, um, what Talaya is saying is we need to refresh. We need to reboot. We need to recharge. We're not going to be good to anybody if we come in and we're burnt out, which is a very common experience for care providers in oncology. So for me, and this didn't happen as a young kid, in the Boy Scouts or anything. I just found nature when I was in my late 30s and found adventures and, going out into the world and traveling and climbing hills and trails and mountains and biking through countries and doing all sorts of cool, crazy stuff. I think gives me a different perspective, a chance to sort of see beautiful things and again, enrich myself from seeing different cultures, different diversity, different people, and bringing it back, to my clinic. I don't just travel and don't tell anybody where I'm going. I involve everybody. And when I come back, I usually have some kind of a cultural gift for everybody in the department and, tell stories because inevitably there's going to be a story, like living in an oil can in the Caucasus Mountains of Russia for a week, all sorts of different stories. So, and it really actually increases the morale of the clinic. And the patients, again, love the stories as well. So that's what enriches me. My greatest joy outside of taking care of cancer patients, survivor thrivers, is my 3 children. They're grown now. And I would be honored if any of my 2 daughters ever became even 10% of the individual that you are, Talaya.
Oh, wow. Thank you, Tom. I appreciate that so much. And I'm sure they are amazing women. And having a father like you, I'm sure that they are just knocking the ball out the park. So, and Tom, it's very apparent to me that you are used to, you mentioned diversity, that you're really used to and comfortable with being around different kinds of people. And please tell the audience, Tom, like what have your patients taught you over the years? What are like 2 or 3 key things that you've learned from your patients?
Yeah, well, you mentioned diversity and differences. So, one of the greatest gifts that I think I have, again, from our creator, and I don't want to get too religious or whatever, it seems not to be in fashion these days. But if you do have faith,
Sadly.
yep, I know it is. But if you have faith and if you believe you have a higher power, one of the greatest things about being a caregiver is you get to take care of people in great need. And you get to take care of people who may not have the same advantages that you have. They may not have the same resources you have, may not have the same upbringing that you have, and certainly come into the table very, very needy. And you will also get a great opportunity to see people with every shade of color under the earth. And to me, to be able to meet somebody in need, no matter what their gender is, what their orientation is, what their affirmation of themselves are, whatever their cultural background, get to know them a little bit, and to have the privilege and honor of caring for them. You had asked me before, who I am. The first question I ask a patient when I see them isn't to tell me about their prostate cancer, is to have them tell me something about them. And they kind of look at me a little strange and cockeyed, and they don't really understand what I'm saying. And then, then I'll kind of, tease it out of them. But, and you can imagine tens of thousands of stories. I have met patients that have met popes and presidents. I have had people from being COOs of companies to people who have been black dirt onion farmers, immigrants, and people of service, military, police, firemen in the Hudson Valley, to the highest of the highest to the lowest of the lows. And again, it's a privilege and honor to get to know each of them. But as far as the lessons that I've learned, there's 2 that I think that are most visceral to me. Number 1 is courage, right? I happen to have a lot of good traits in the sense that God gave me a lot of gifts to help my patients, but I am a terrible hypochondriac. So when I walk into the clinic and someone has a real problem, it really puts things in perspective for me, and lets me really try to be courageous in my own personal life, because all of our patients, universally express that bravery and that courage. And number 2, and this is a really important lesson for all of our listeners on your show, that may not be survivor thrivers, but may be a family member of one, or just someone who enjoys your show, or someone who's just a friend. There's that perception, that realism. I think that we have a very fantastical view of our own mortality. Even as
Yeah.
someone, in my mid 60s, I don't really think about my mortality, even though, technically speaking, the sand in my hourglass is starting to come down. I don't think about it ever. And I think I have this feeling, which many people feel if they don't have cancer, that they're basically immortal. And then I tell the story to all of my patients, and I've said it on my podcast. It's the story of the heart attack and the breast cancer. So a woman who's 45 years old and a man who's 45 years old walks into the emergency room on the same day at the same moment. The man's having a heart attack. The woman has stage 1 breast cancer. They both go into the hospital. The man gets his stent or his bypass. The woman has her lumpectomy and then goes in for her radiation. They both leave the hospital on the same day. One of the patients is going to go to the bar, going to have some fried chicken, going to drink a few beers, going to play some golf. And the other one is going to go to the funeral home and is going to buy a plot. Which one of them is, obviously the breast cancer patient is going to the funeral home. The guy with the heart attack is going to go drink some beer, smoke some cigarettes, and eat some chicken wings. And guess who's dying first? The heart attack is going to die 30 years before the breast cancer patient. So I think it is that realistic view of our mortality is a great lesson, because there is no denial with cancer. There is no, well, you know what, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to live forever. No, you realize that the clock is ticking, that again, you have an expiration date, and when it is up to our creator. But that is something that I think cancer survivors have, which I've always said is an advantage. In 40 years, Talaya, I have never met a cancer survivor thriver who has not told me that cancer in some way, obviously sucks, you don't want it, but hasn't been a gift in certain ways.
I would have to agree with that, Tom. It certainly has been for me. It really, and I'll speak for myself, it really opened my eyes to areas of my life where I actually deserved better. Areas of my life where I wasn't fulfilling my purpose. I was going off of what other people and what society said I should be doing. And it just made me evaluate relationships, work, all kinds of things. But it really made me figure out what made me happy and how to get more of those things, how to work more of those things into my life. And then also it really forced me to learn about my body, what it needs, how to listen to it, where to go if I'm not sure about something, different things in nature that can possibly be healing as well. And so it just really opened my eyes to a lot of different things. And I love that you bring that up, because that's so important. And then also I want to piggyback to something that I think is really important. And that is when you described what you do or say when you initially meet your patients and you say, tell me about who you are. And I think so many patients are like, huh? They're not making the connection because they're always seen as cancer. They're just always looked at as the person with cancer. And most doctors are so focused on only the cancer. And so I just want to applaud you for seeing the people, because that's healing in itself. Before anything else starts, you have really tapped into their soul, their spirit of who they are, and you're saying, I actually see you, the person. So I think that's so important.
Yeah, thank you. And I do want to piggyback off of your piggyback and talk to our survivor thrivers out there. So when I do that and I ask someone who they are and they're kind of saying, what are you talking about? What I say back is very simple. I am trying to develop a trusting relationship between myself and you. I am trying to learn about you, because you are not a prostate cancer. You are not a breast cancer. You are not a lymphoma cancer. You are a human being. You have a story. You have a history. You have a trajectory. I have been given this honor. You have chosen me. You have given me your life to put in my hands I have this power to be able to potentially cure you, and yet I don't know anything about you. So you're not leaving this office until I know your favorite color, your favorite food, and your favorite chewing gum. I need to know those three, because if you're not going to tell me anything else, I need to know those three things. And they start laughing, and then they tell me stories. So an 80-something-year-old patient comes in to see me, and she sees me in the jersey, but she's a very, quiet and again, I guess old school. The doctor is here and the patient is here, and that's not the way we practice. And nor should that be the way we practice. We should be a team, not any sort of a hierarchy. We should be extraordinarily equal and egalitarian. So anyway, this lovely, lovely woman, I would recommend listening to this podcast. Her name is Walda. Walda, her father pitched in the 1932 World Series for the Yankees, was dear friends with Babe Ruth and all the great ones. She has his World Series ring in a safe deposit box, which she promised she will take me to one day to see. And in addition to that, what he was known for, his name was Waldo Brown, but his name was Jumbo because he was the biggest player in major leagues of the era. And the way that they used to joke around with Jumbo Brown and make fun of him because of how big he was just extraordinary. And I made her laugh. And, by the end of that visit, it was like we were friends forever. So here's me, the sports buff, with this little old lady, the little blue-haired lady whose father was a New York Yankee in the 30s who used to go drink beer and chase women with Babe Ruth. So I just thought that was like the greatest thing. And she represents, what I want to accomplish. And that's to get to know that person, because apparently, obviously, her relationship with her father, the pride of being the daughter of Jumbo Brown, that was huge. And for her to be able to tell somebody that and not have to keep it in, that was amazing, right?
Yeah. And, I bet she looks forward to coming to see you. Every time she has to come, she's like, yep, this is going to be a good visit. No matter what happens, we're going to have a good conversation. And that makes a big difference. It really does.
Yeah.
Yeah, especially for people who may not have anyone. So
Absolutely.
great job, Tom. I love that. I love that. One thing I want to talk about is many people define cancer survivor in different ways. For example, one person may define a survivor as a person or someone who has completed treatment. And for the sake of this conversation going forward, Tom, when you speak about survivors, what phase of cancer are you referring to? Is it when someone's initially diagnosed, after treatment? Because people just see it and view it in different ways. So, wondering your perspective on that.
I love this question, and it's a very, very dear question to me, and I'm going to tell you why. So we're on our fourth year of podcasting, and when I was starting
Yay.
to, but thank you, thank you, thank you. When I was starting to podcast, I thought one of the first, and what we did in the beginning was we did what was called modules. So we would basically take a subject and maybe do 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever podcasts on that particular subject. And what better way to start a podcast for cancer survivors than defining survivorship? So that was basically my first module that I did. And I did some deep digging and research. So I love the subject. And I'm going to tell you guys all the story of Dr. Fitzhugh Mullen, because Dr. Fitzhugh Mullen was the guy who identified or began that term of cancer survivor and the cancer survivorship. So Fitzhugh Mullen was a very privileged, male who grew up in New York City. His grandfather was a physician. His father was a physician. He went to a very privileged, private school in Manhattan. He went to Harvard undergrad as a history major and the University of Chicago for medical school. Now, here's this privileged white doctor, and where does he end up? He ends up one summer during medical school in the Deep South in the 1960s in Mississippi. And he's sitting on the porch with the patient, and there's a bunch of people that are trying to come and start doing some lynching back in the 1960s. And there's this there's young, probably skinny white kid, in the bowels of Mississippi, probably in one of those, cupboard, shacks, ramshackled shacks on some, whatever, a sharecropping plot with all of these people sort of coming through, trying to invoke terror and fear through the community. And that set ablaze this social activism in Dr. Fitzhugh Mullen. Fitzhugh ended up in public health. He went to New Mexico, worked with the Indians for 3 years, worked with C. Everett Koop, et cetera, et cetera. But what made him special, here's finally the part of the story about the cancer survivor, is at age 32 with a 3-year-old kid, he ended up with lung cancer. And he was at Harvard. They did surgery, they did radiation, they did chemotherapy. They did everything possible to try to kill him. Basically, when they went in to do the biopsy, they cut his vena cava. He almost died. The radiation caused his sternum to become necrotic. They had to cut his sternum out. He ended up having to have skin grafts. He had chemotherapy. He lost half of his body weight. And here he was, a doctor, 32 years old, on death's door with a 3-year-old kid. So when he recovered finally through everything that he went through, he began the National Coalition for Cancer Survivorship. And that term, survivorship, came directly from Fitzhugh Mullen. Now, his career is decorated on so many different levels: health equity, disparity of care. Here's this guy, unbelievable career, just unbelievable, Hall of Fame guy, to use a sports analogy. But getting back to, him with survivorship, thrivership. So I'm, now on episode 3 of this module, and I'm all on the bandwagon for survivorship. So survivorship, according to Dr. Mullen, starts from the second that you get diagnosed with cancer. There was no differentiation between a cancer survivor who was going to be cured and a cancer survivor who was not going to be cured. And I thought that was brilliant. So everyone is on the same page. It's a level playing field, and everybody is going to be a survivor. And then I met Dr. Katie Deming. So Dr. Katie Deming, who is from Portland, another radiation oncologist of all things, she wrote the Sentinel paper on there is a large group of patients who actually do not relate to the term survivor. They actually are off put by being termed a survivor for a great number of reasons. So for that reason, when you listen to my podcast, I never say survivor without putting that slash and saying thriver, or you can say aliver, or you could say whatever you want. I know that you consider yourself a thriver, and and much respect to that. So I don't want to pigeonhole anybody in how they identify in their journey with cancer. It could be as a survivor because it's intuitive. It's like, I'm a survivor of a circumstance, of this great battle that I created. Also, a lot of people don't want to be known as warriors. You would think that would be, something that would be, advantageous, but it's actually, a lot of people don't feel that way. So that was sort of a long answer, but I love, it's a colorful story, and it's all historically true.
And it's so important because I'm going to be honest, I didn't know the history behind it. And so that really helps me to really understand the value of those words. And you're right, Tom, it's really each person's preference, whatever they feel. And I always, when I was going through my cancer journey, I didn't really see myself as a survivor until after survivor thriver, until after I completed treatment. So to each his own. But here's the thing, language is important too. And you mentioned like warrior and conqueror and that kind of thing. That invokes like a battle or a fight. And I think that's not the way that I would want to look at cancer just because it kind of invokes this feeling of like fear or anxiousness or something like that. And so, but everyone's different. Everyone's
Yeah,
different.
absolutely. And even with my own organization. So now we're talking 25 years ago. So
Mhm.
25 years ago, I came up with Citizens Reunited to Overcome Cancer. And the acronym is CROC, and our little, what would you say? Our mascot is a crocodile, right? Obviously, and
Mhm.
blah, 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 blah. And then our little sort of motto is uh, turning tragedy into triumph, right? So
Mhm.
now I'm on board number, Jesus, maybe 20, like if I've been doing this 25 years, I'm probably on my 12th board. And the new board member comes on board this year. He's fantastic. His name is Nick. I love him because he questions everything. He's a total skeptic. And he said, I don't like this. I don't like overcoming cancer. I don't like this turning, tragedy into triumph. I don't like any of this. And I say, Nick, I get it. Especially nowadays, we're talking about survivors and thrivers and this and that, and everybody wants their own whatever. And I'm
Mhm.
saying, Nick, I get it, but you know what? I've been doing this 25 years. We're branded. We're not changing it. That's it. Deal with it. Get used to it.
Mhm.
That's just, I'm going to have to put a nix on that, but it's true, right? The words are
Mhm.
so powerful.
They are, they are. So thank you so much for going into detail on that. I think it's really important. And so now, Tom, let's shift. Other than fear, of course, just about everyone that is diagnosed with cancer experiences fear. A lot of that is tied to the unknown. What are some common things that you see patients struggle with?
Yeah, I think that clearly in my head, the second most important thing that I have to help patients with is lack of information. And I think lack of information and how information is exchanged. And I'm going to use a story from one of my favorite people. So let's first talk about confusion and lack of information. So a person comes in and, when we talk about Citizens Reunited to Overcome Cancer, and we talk about my podcast, and we're going to get into this in a little bit, what are some of the things that I try to evangelize about? And that's the broken system of medical care, especially the broken system of how oncology is being managed. And one of the problems is that the doctors and nurses have a limit to the amount of time that they could spend with each patient. Number two is that the comprehension level of each patient is different, and it should be because not
Mhm.
everyone is different. I mean, not everyone is the same. Third thing is that because if you have a lack of time, plus everyone has a different comprehension level, and then you bring in the complexity of cancer, especially in this day and age, because now we're talking about individualized genetic and targeted therapy whose pathways are so intricate that as a mid 60 doctor, I literally have to go back to school to learn all this stuff. That's how, intense things are getting in the field. So now a patient comes in, has no idea what they're dealing with, has no idea, no information, and that type of thing. And I had a patient and their family come in the other day, and she wasn't doing well. She looked terrible, and none of her oncologists were telling her what was going on. I literally had to take an hour. I literally had to stop everything and basically build that foundation where they knew what was going on. They didn't know their stage, they didn't know their prognosis, they didn't know anything. And something just as basic and rudimentary as just what do I have? Like, what kind of cancer do I have? Like, I have a stage two. What does that even mean? I don't know what a stage is. Lymphoma, Hodgkin's lymphoma, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, follicular lymphoma. I mean, we could talk all day about lymphomas, of which I know that you're an expert, right? So
Mhm.
then, which is a great segue into the way information is exchanged. To my favorite person is Talaya Dendy. And the way my friend Talaya was told she had cancer was on
Mhm.
a Friday afternoon driving
Yeah.
home from work on a freeway from a nurse, um, you know, and my friend had to pull over into an Annie Says or a Filene's basement or wherever you had to go, and just to walk around, just to kind of
Yeah.
get your bearings, just so you can get home alive and not crash your car,
Mhm.
into an embankment, right?
That's right.
We have fear, lack of information, confusion, and the way information is delivered. Those are my pet peeves. Those are the things that I think really are my take-home messages about that question.
Yeah, I think all of those are so critical. And the way information is delivered, I think that is so overlooked. And Tom, can you please just explain how you were able to take that hour? Because a lot of times, no one's going to take that hour. They're just going to say, you know what? Yep, yep. Talk to the nurse or reschedule, or, it's just very short and curt, and that makes the person feel even worse. So, how is it, Tom, that you were able to take that hour in a system that gives you what seems like 2 minutes to the person who has cancer?
The answer to that is very easy. It's teamwork. So,
Mhm.
who is your favorite player on the Lynx?
I would have to say, well, she's not on there anymore, but Maya Moore was my favorite player.
Okay. Say
Hmm.
she's having a stinker of a game. She's just
Yeah.
having a terrible game. I mean, she can't hit the side of a barn. The ball's, rolling out of bounds off her foot. She's got 4 fouls. She's just playing the worst game of her life.
Hmm.
But they have to win this game. So she has to rely on the 4 other ladies on the court. So when we have one of those situations where an emergency comes up or a patient's decompensating or there's a problem, then we have to rely on our team. So, it's at that moment where everyone has to step up, the nurses, nurse practitioners, the advanced practitioners, and everybody has to make that schedule run as good, the best they can under bad circumstances. Coming into a cancer clinic is not like going into a restaurant, right?
Mm-mm.
So there is no time clock. However, again, getting to my pet peeves, I also am a believer in not allowing our survivor thrivers to accept a 2-hour wait to get into their oncologist's office. I am going to tell you guys, you deserve to be in that appointment. I'll give you 7 minutes, and I will have a patient in a room within 7 minutes of their appointment. So, in order to keep that going while I'm involved in something that's taking longer than I anticipated, I have to rely on the teammates. So, your players, 4 teammates, have to then step up their game and play better in order to achieve what we want to achieve.
Thank you for explaining that. And that's so important, teamwork. But that also speaks to how well your staff is trained and interconnected. And I think that's so important because a lot of times, in the cancer and oncology spaces, there's so much disconnection. You can talk to a nurse who doesn't know what the doctor says. There's no coordination of care across different doctors. And so that is beautiful. I love that and so important. A very great example and model that I hope, if there's other oncologists or doctors listening, that they can hear that it's possible. So thank
Yeah,
you.
and it's really and again, I challenge the leaders, in oncology care to create that team. So if you look at some of the greatest teams of all time in sports, again, we're going to go to another sports analogy. Usually and almost always, the team that wins the championship doesn't necessarily have the most superstars. As a matter of fact, most of the time they don't have any more than 1 or 2 superstars. It's really important to develop that leadership. Red Holtzman in the 1969 New York Knicks had a very good team. They were very solid, but they were not the best team. They did not have the best players, but they had the best 5 players who knew how to play together. And that's what you have to do as a leader, is that you have to take your team, and believe it or not, Talaya, it's not a hard ask, because most people that are taking care of oncology patients, taking care of survivor thrivers, want to be there. It's
Yeah.
not like they're floating and they got stuck in oncology. They want to work with those patients. That is their professional desire, is to help survivor thrivers. So they're there, they're willing, they're eager, they want the responsibility. And we have to kind of break down that top heavy model of the doctor being here, the nurse being here. Everyone has to be equal from the minute you walk into the cancer center. That, Sandra, Kathy, Tatiana, Millie at the front desk, right? Those are that's the first layer of, you could either have people that are warm, caring, and loving, or you could have a bunch of obstructionists, right? So first layer, they have to be equal. Then they get into the clinic and they see the nurses. They have to be equal because it's the nurses that spend the most amount of time with education and those types of things. I love radiation oncology because it is a team. And actually, the doctors are the weakest link in radiation oncology because we do all the supervision, but really it's our physicists, our dosimetrists, and our therapists and our nurses that really do all the back-breaking work. And of course, we always get the credit, but the credit truly is to the team. So maybe it's because I'm a radiation oncologist that I grew up with that culture. Much respect to those doctors that have those specialized skills. So the neurosurgeons that need to decompress that spinal cord compression and take these tumor cells off of the spinal cord. And if they miss or if they miscalculate, the patient's going to become, paralyzed, or to the medical oncologist who or the researcher who has to derive these targeted therapies or whatever, to those doctors who have those specialized skills. I do not mean any disrespect, but I think they would agree with me in the sense that on a day-to-day level in your community cancer centers, it is a team endeavor. It is an egalitarian democracy, and that's the way it really should be practiced.
Thank you so much for explaining that. And I can say, Tom, that throughout our conversation so far, equality has been a common thread. And that's why you're so successful. Like you said, you don't see yourself way up here. You're like, I need to do this with the team. We have to work together as a team. And you see your patients as team players as well as partners. So I love that. What is something, Tom, other than, learning about who they are, what would you say to someone who is newly diagnosed with cancer?
Well, the first thing that I have to do is I literally have to peel them off of the ceiling.
Yeah.
So, you come in and you hear cancer, and it's my favorite thing to do of all time. And I have a really great analogy. And for anybody out there who has just been diagnosed, I call it my reframing appointment, because what I do is I reframe their disease. So I say to them, okay, Talaya, you come to see me with this problem. You hear the word cancer. You are terrified because of a word. You are terrified because you have cancer. You are terrified because you are in a cancer center. You are terrified because you have to have cancer treatments. What if I were to tell you that you were coming into a clinic with hypertension, or you were coming into a clinic with diabetes, or you were coming into the clinic with some kind of a chronic disease? And if I were to tell you that if you take your medication or you take your treatment and you continue your visits with these specialized doctors that take care of this specialized disease, that you're going to be fine, how would you feel about that? They say, well, I would feel great. And I say, I just reframe your entire perspective. You are that patient with diabetes. You are that patient with hypertension. You are that patient with this problem, or that problem. You now are seeing special doctors. We happen to be called oncologists. We could be called rheumatologists. We could be called infectious disease doctors. We could be called anything you want to hear, but that's just our title. You're in a cancer center. Well, that's where cancer patients get their treatments, in a cancer center. Are our treatments toxic? Yeah. But anybody who takes medication for blood pressure, it makes you dizzy. It makes you feel like crap. It makes you just basically crazy. If you take medication for this or for that, You take your diabetes medication. Nobody ever thinks about it, but really, cancer is no different than any of these other chronic diseases. Yes, you have a problem. Yes, it could be serious. But again, getting back to that realistic view, that non-fantastical view of life, yeah, everybody has to sit in that seat. Everybody is going to get sick. Whatever the name of the disease is, it's going to be serious. So let's get past cancer. Let's not empower a disease just by its name. I use the Harry Potter method. Say the word Voldemort. It's okay. It's not going to kill you. You don't have to say the one who can't be named. We can name it. It's called cancer. It's okay. It doesn't sound good. It's got a bad connotation, but let's get past it. So that is my primary lesson, is to reframe their disease.
That's so important because that really sets the tone and it helps them to get in a better state of mind and to really just get down to their bare bones of what it really is. And that the way that you do that, it just simplifies everything. So that's wonderful. And Tom, what would you say to a person who has completed treatment? And as you know, many times, we're unsure of what to do next, what life is going to look like next. What would you say to them?
Again, I want to make sure and reassure everybody that their support team, that their caregivers are very clear that you finish your treatment. That's like scoring the winning touchdown and being carried off the field. That's a happy thing. That's a good thing. That is nothing to be afraid of, as long as you know you will never be abandoned. To let you know that even though you're not coming in every day, getting your treatment every day, being protected every day, that does not mean that you are not still loved, that you are not still supported, that you are not still going to be cared for. You are now moving on to the next step. It's as in any stage of life, going from preschool to kindergarten to first grade, middle school to high school to college to your first job, marriage, kids. It's the whole thing. It's that fear. It's no different. But as long as you know if you're in the right place, because you'll know if you're in the wrong place, is if you don't feel supported, if you don't feel that you are having your questions answered. If you ring that bell in radiation therapy and you don't know when your next appointment is, you find another radiation oncologist. Because the truth of the matter is, you should know exactly what's next. So here's a scenario. Prostate cancer. From the day you walk in, you have the blueprint. You have the playbook. Okay, here's what we're going to do. First, we're going to talk about this, educate you, give you options, gives you alternatives, and do shared decision making. Then we're going to give you 2 weeks. Take a second opinion if you want. Do whatever you want. Pray, talk to people, whatever you got to do. Go through your due diligence. I'm going to call you. I am going to stalk you. I'm going to find you, and I'm going to talk to you, or you're going to call me on my cell phone to ask me questions. Then you're going to make your decision. If the decision is you're going to have treatment with me, fine. If you're going to have treatment somewhere else, fine. All I care about is you get cured. That's all I care about. Then next is your treatment. How is it going to be done? Where is it going to be done? What time is it going to be done? What to expect? Blah, 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 blah. You go through all that. Then you start the treatment. Then you get them through their treatment. You see them every week. You see them every day. You see them as much as you have to see them to get them through their treatment. Then they have to know that they come back in 2 weeks. They see the nurse practitioner. They come back in 1 month. They see me. They come back in 3 months. Check the PSA. PSA starts at 7. They're going to check it 3 months after we're done. PSA is 0.8. You're cured. I'll see you in 3 months. We'll get another PSA. They better know that before they even start treatment, because otherwise they're going to be lost.
Wow. We need more of you, Tom. We need more of you. That is not happening.
I know, and actually we're going to be segueing into the broken system. It's such a broken system, Talaya.
Yes.
It is very, very sad.
Wow. I have to thank you again, Tom, for all that you do. I have to. Okay, so now let's talk about CROC, Citizens Reunited to Overcome Cancer. Please tell the audience all about CROC and its 4 pillars.
Awesome. So CROC is my sort of my passion. Like besides, of course, my passion to take care of our patients. But when I first started cancer care, um, it became apparent immediately that just being great at what we do is not enough. It's such a special disease. It's such a visceral disease. It's such a scary disease that you need to do more. So I started as a young doctor going to what was called the Relay for Life and started getting involved with that. And then I started seeing the power that survivors had. There was this energy, there was this friction, there was this spark, there was this fire, there was this ambrosia, there was this stew that was cooking in a slow cooker, and all the flavors were coming together, and the carrots and the potatoes and the gravy and the pot roast that was all kind of seeping in with the bay leaves, and it was all coming together. And then I met two amazing women in my waiting room, Mary and Beth. Mary and Beth could not have been any two different people. One was a farmer. She was about 6'2" and she was a farmer. I mean, she was thick and strong and tough as nails. And then the other one was this little city girl. Her name was Beth. And Beth, couldn't have weighed 80 pounds. She was this little city girl, a little twig, and they both had stage 1 breast cancer. They met in the waiting room. They became best friends because they had the sharing of this very special bond. And we became friends, the three of us, because they were in the waiting room at the same time. I'm a guy who loves to go into the waiting room and say hello to everybody, make sure everybody's happy and having, a good time and getting to know each other. And they kind of connected with me, and they say, Dr. E, here's what we're going to do. We're both ending on the same day. You're taking us out to lunch. So I said, okay, Evelyn, do me a favor. Don't book me through lunch. I'm taking them out to lunch. I took these ladies out to lunch, and for me, you see how much I talk, right? We're already about 3 hours into the podcast. So I was speechless. I had nothing to say because they laughed, they cried, they shared. They were so connected that it was a connection that I had never even imagined was possible between two human beings. And I said, I don't know how, but I got to figure out a way of bottling this and making this, and getting this out to people. And the reason why it was so successful was in the 1990s, there were no support groups. There was nothing. There was only American Cancer Society, and that was it. And there was really no resources. We didn't have social media. We didn't have WebExes. We didn't have all of these things for survivors. We had nothing. So every month for years, we had these dinners. And the first dinner had about maybe 40 people, and then it would go into the hundreds. And if a cancer survivor walked in the door, they never paid a dime. It was almost like Jesus and the 7 loaves of bread and the fishes. The food just appeared. The entertainment appeared. The lectures, we gave them lectures. We did fun stuff. We did road trips. We did everything. We were before Meals on Wheels. We would do home visits and bring food and do, death calls and the whole thing. And we did this forever. And then all of a sudden, that was not necessary anymore because people caught on. They got it. They understood. Support groups were starting to pop up. Cancer became a thing. Breast cancer really brought us into the spotlight. And thank God for our breast cancer survivors, because a lot of attention got made. And we ended up with all of these great resources for all cancer survivor thrivers. Yes. So then we went into our next incarnation, which was to help out an organization by distributing grants for patients who had no money, who couldn't afford their medication, couldn't afford their treatments, or couldn't afford even, to heat their homes in the winter, or had no food in their cupboard. So we did that for about 8 years. And then we decided we needed to go in a new direction. And I also was missing that sort of flesh to flesh thing. And then COVID hit. So then I thought to myself, I have a big mouth. I have a lot of experience. I have a lot of stories to tell. What better platform than to do a podcast? I could
Yes.
reach more people and I could tell my story and I could tell the story of, yeah, I wanted to give the survivor thrivers a Swiss Army knife. I wanted them to have the tools to be able to navigate their survivorship journey, to have the tools to know what to expect. So that's how the four pillars came in, is because in my practice I had this advantage of being able to see right from the battlefield. So I am not a doctor who sits in the office on the fifth floor, way away from. I mean, I am there. The bullets are flying. I'm in the foxhole with everybody else, and I want to be there forever. I don't want to be an administrator. I want to be there because this is what I found. There are four main categories of broken systems in medicine. And this is what all of the people who are listening to this podcast, I want them to know this is what they deserve. This is not your father's cancer anymore. This is now a new generation of survivors who really have a right to the best, most dignified care that's available. So in gender informality, we talked about this, the jerseys, to be approachable, to learn about your patients, to break down that wall so they feel comfortable, so they feel that they can talk to you, that they could share intimate things with you, and they could share things that they wouldn't tell anyone else. And with that information, we will get better outcomes. Disseminate information. It is a shock that patients are not informed about their disease, about their treatments, about what to expect. It is shocking that Hippocrates, his first job for anyone who was going to practice the art of healing, was to be a teacher. That's our first job, is to teach, not to heal. You teach, then you heal. And no one's getting information. Totally broken. If you're walking into a doctor's office and they're not giving you the information, it's not because you're bad or that's the status quo or that's what you should expect. You deserve more than that. You need to know your prognosis, your stage, your treatments, the exactness, the side effects. You have to know everything, and that's important. Encourage approachability. You need to make sure that they feel that they are worthy of approaching the God, right? The doctor, the nurse. They have to feel worthy that they can approach the system, the medical system. You walk into an emergency room, you're there 14 hours, 16 hours before you even see anybody. I mean, that's unacceptable. I mean, you need to be able to know that if you're sick, you have to be able to approach your medical system, and you have to have accessibility to that medical system. Talaya, I can't tell you how many times a day I get on the phone with a colleague and I say, okay, because we're not in a captured medical system. And it's like, okay, listen, I have this patient. They have head and neck cancer. They need you to do an exam. They need you to start chemotherapy. And it's like, yeah, I'll see him in about 2 weeks. Oh, I'll do a biopsy next week. I go, no, you're going to do a biopsy this week and you're going to see the patient this week. Because if I just said yes, then the patient's not going to start treatment for 6 or 8 weeks.
Yeah.
No good. That's not right. So this is what we do at CROC. We try to point out these 4 basic pillars that they're crumbling under the stress of a broken system. And in the podcast, every week, there's something different. And we'll talk about this in a minute, I'm sure. But I just want to answer the question to let your viewers know what they are entitled to in their care.
That's amazing. What they are entitled to, not just what they get, what they deserve, that what they're entitled to. And you talk about worthiness. I think that that's so important as well, because a lot of people are made to feel like they're not worthy of good care. of equitable care, of quality care. And so I think those four pillars are so important. And Tom, please tell the audience, for anyone who's interested, how can they get involved with CROC?
Well, CROC, we'll share our link. It's crocvip.com, I believe. And
Yes.
from that website, you can hit our podcast and learn more about us. And I think, as I said, over 4 years, we do a weekly podcast, so we have all sorts of things out there for people. Sometimes I have what would you say, Talaya, when you do sort of the same sort of theme, like themed
Oh, yes, the
podcast, like you
same
have a
thing.
theme. So one
Yes.
of my themes
Uh-huh.
is called confessions. So
Okay.
confessions are, when I don't hit the high note on a certain day, where I feel I could have done better.
Oh,
For
wow.
instance, I did a confessions recently on a patient who was just the sweetest guy in the world, who had this really terrible abdominal tumor that was basically coming out of his abdomen. And
Oh,
I gave him radiation and I took care of it. And he got his pain went away, his tumor shrank, but unfortunately, he still passed away because it was advanced cancer. But what I could have done better was I didn't facilitate the patient um, disseminating this information to his family. So his family thought, when we were so excited about, the way things were going, I think they thought he was going to get cured when he didn't get cured. And that information, and imagine if the expectations are not aligned. So that's an
right.
example of like a confessions. I'm going to do a confessions in a couple of weeks of what I heard from a colleague. So I had a very nice patient. I still have a very nice patient. She's in her 90s and she has
Wow.
a wonderful family, but they are the family that wants to know everything, which is great. And that's
Hmm.
what we want. You deserve that.
Yeah.
Some people aren't that way. Some people are that way. It doesn't matter. Like you said, we're all different, right?
Hmm.
So this particular practitioner, a very good friend of mine, an excellent oncologist, as a matter of fact, must have had a bad day being pushed and they were pushing his buttons. He wasn't getting the test results to them. They were asking all the appropriate things. Again, getting back to what they are entitled to, what they deserve.
Right.
They were just asking for what they deserve. He was basically just kind of going back in time and thinking, well, I'm the doctor, you'll get the information when I give it to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when you got diagnosed, it's like, well,
Yeah.
she can wait till Monday.
Yeah.
No, she can't.
Right.
I'm not letting that lady spend the weekend not sleeping because you're too lazy to call your patient or to get your patient to come in or meet her on a Saturday. Here's an
Yeah.
idea: get in your car and meet her at the office on a Saturday. How's that sound?
I would have
And
loved it.
then and he finally got pushed and he says, "What do you want me to do? You're 90 years old." Like that's the worst thing you could ever say,
Wow.
right? What he meant to say was, let's define what your expectations are. We have to be careful because you are 90, and even though you look great and you feel great on most days, we can't do too much because then we're going to make you sicker and your quality of life will diminish. Like what he was trying to say and the way it came out, just we're not connecting. So that's called the confessions modules. Then I do my interviews. Like I found out what a
Mhm.
cancer doula was. I never knew
Yes.
what that was. So I try to find people, out there who are, experts in their fields to share things with my constituency. I also do, modules like teaching modules, defining survivorship or whatever. And
Nice.
then I do, and then I spend a lot of time on my podcast going through the broken systems, going through the four pillars. And there's so many different examples. We could go on forever talking about insurance companies and denials and peer-to-peers and delays in treatment and colleagues not speaking. The whole gamut. We try to approach. So I really encourage anybody out there who has an interest or feels that these subject matters might be operative or helpful to you guys. Again, back to that Swiss Army knife. If I could be your Swiss Army knife, that would be great.
Wonderful. I love all the information and resources that you share, Tom. And I really like your own vulnerability where you talk about, well, I think I could have done that better. And that's so rare. So thank you for sharing that too. And then also there was one thing that I'm going to go back. I'm going to have the information about your podcast in the listen notes as well. They can also access your podcast from the CROC website as well. But I will have all that information in the listen notes so that they can easily find it. The other thing that I found on the CROC website that I thought was really important was the power of survivor equation. Please, Tom, touch on that and explain why that's important.
Yeah, no, of course. So, radiation oncologists are science nerds. So we are like huge math nerds and physics nerds and all that kind of thing. So I thought let's come up with an equation for power to empower our survivors. So I looked at the things that I felt were really important toward giving a survivor power, and I looked at the things that detract or take away power from a survivor. So the two main things actually, the two main things that empower a survivor are the depth of their network as well as the information that they're receiving. So the network starts, of course, with your family. And sadly, Talaya, there are so many of my patients who come into my office alone. It's
Yeah,
sad, but there are many people who come in with a very supportive family. It could be their parents, it could be their spouses, their partners, it could be their children, it could be their family, it could be their buddies, it could be their neighbors, it could be their ex-spouses. I've had ex-spouses with
nice,
current spouses in a room. It's been great. So it's been
nice,
really, really sweet to see that network. Then you have to look at your care team. They are your network. And then you have to do your own networking. Now, it's a lot easier to network now than it was in 1999. It's so much easy to find podcasts like Navigating Cancer Together. It's so easy to find the CROC podcast and so many other podcasts, not just about cancer, but just about self-help and all those types of things that could increase your survivorship power. And then the amount of information. So that's when you have to become an investigator. And I'm not talking about Google. I did a whole module with Dr. Google. Stay away from Dr. Google. Do your own. Listen, you're all smart people. Go out. You may not think you are, but you're smarter than you think. Go out there and become your own oncologist. Do some digging, do some reading, do some research. Talk to your doctor. I spent an hour this week going over clinical trials and the papers, going over data with a patient this week because she wanted to know the data.
oh,
If you want to know the data, guess what? Ask your care team. You are entitled to that data. That's our
yes,
job, is to give you that. So if you take your network and you take your information and that becomes exponential. What does that mean in plain English? So you take two numbers and then you multiply them together and then you raise them to a power, the power of two, the power of three, the power of four. And that's when you supercharge your power as a survivor. Sadly, on the other end is fear.
yeah,
Fear is the great killer of survivorship power. So, whatever you have to do to mitigate that fear, whatever techniques you need to mitigate that fear, if you have to re-establish your spirituality, if you've strayed from what it was that made your spirituality as a young person, and then you went through life and life beat you down and you sort of lost that, you need to find it. You need to find your way back. You need to find your way, whether it's through mindfulness, whether it's through meditation, whether it's through acupuncture, whether it's through nature, whether it's through reading poetry, whether it's, going to a museum, whatever you need, whatever it is that you need to mitigate fear. Because when you square fear, so if you take fear and you square it, you reduce your survivorship power by 4, not
wow,
by 2, by 4. It's called the inverse square law. So when you say you take your fear and it goes to a 4, now it goes to a 16. You have increased your fear and reduced your power by the power of 16. just by increasing it from 2 to 4. So that's the power of survivorship equation.
That's powerful. That's so powerful. And to be able to get a survivor thriver to think that way, to pause and just think about that equation, I think that can just change so many things, so many thoughts, and just say, hey, no, I can't focus on fear because it's decreasing my chances of, overcoming or I'll just say overcoming this thing. So I think that's important for people to know about that equation. And Tom, is there anything else that you'd like to share about CROC or the CROC podcast?
I just want to actually just take a minute and thank you, Talaya, for having me on today. It's just been such a great experience for me. I feel almost as if today was a continuation of our conversation back
Absolutely.
in March. And it's almost as if it doesn't really matter whether I'm interviewing you or you're interviewing me. I think we're accomplishing the same thing, and that's to give information to some really, really great and entitled people.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. And I'm so honored to have the opportunity to talk with you again. We're going to have to do this again, Tom, because I had so many other questions that came up. I know you're a busy man, and I just want to thank you so much for being so gracious with your time.
I would be honored. Actually, I would love to come on again. And I'm going to basically be texting you every week and ask you, when am I coming on again, Talaya?
All right, we'll get that on the calendar. That's a must. And finally, Tom, is there one I wish I would have known?
So I do have advice for you and for
Mhm.
anyone out there who might be, trying to start a revolution for your survivorship or for survivor thrivers. Join the revolution. It's one of those things where it's not a competition. We're
No,
all on the same team, and the more of us, the better. The more people that are out there screaming that there is inequity, that there is disparity, that there is unfairness, and there is broken systems that is basically standing in the way of good and equitable care. Please join the revolution. And the one thing that I do regret is that when I was young and it became apparent that I caught on to something, so I caught fire and things were really going well, and the number of people coming to the events were growing, and the word was out that there was a safe place where cancer survivors could come in the Hudson Valley to learn and to be loved and to be nourished, and things were great. And I got a consultant who was a very smart person, and I think getting back to that whole doctor top heavy model, I think I wasn't ready at that time. I was younger and I was more full of spit and vinegar, I think. And I think that I had this sort of doctor pride. And, he basically said, hey, what you're doing is pretty good, but, you could be doing this better and that better and that better and that better and that better. And I said, well, what are you talking about? This is great. And I guess what he was trying to say was I could have made more of an impact had I listened to him and done the things he recommended. So for all of you guys out there that are starting to join the forces here, and you have a good idea, an original idea, like Talaya has, please seek out advice, seek out smart people, seek out people who have experience, who have taken the lumps and bumps, and then guess what? Listen to what they have to say. Had I listened at that time, I might have been able to reach probably many, many more people. And that is my one regret. So what I'm hoping to do now is to make up for that through the podcasting world, where I could reach people, across the globe.
And you are doing that, Tom. You are doing amazing work, you and the CROC team. And the podcast is amazing as well. I cannot just sing its praises enough. I listened to several episodes and I'm really excited to share it with you all. Make sure you check out those modules about survivorship. You'll have all the links to everything there. And Tom, thank you, thank you, thank you so much for making this a wonderful episode. It's just such an honor, and I appreciate everything you do.
God bless you, Talaya. You have a wonderful night, and thanks for everything. And again, you're going to get a text from me next week from when I'm coming on next.
All right. God bless, Tom. Thank you. And before we end today, I would like to give a shout out to the listeners. Thank you for joining us. Please share, follow, or subscribe so that you can easily find this podcast and listen again. You can listen to Navigating Cancer Together on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcast. If you are looking to grow your professional network, please join me on LinkedIn. As an active member of the platform, I would like to personally invite you to connect with me there. Let's grow our connections together. Search for Talaya Dendy, TALAYA That is it for this Wednesday. And until next time, let's keep navigating cancer together. Take care.